Welcome to the Statement Makers podcast, where we hear from everyday people like you and me who have overcome the odds and are doing extraordinary things to make their communities and the world a better place to live. We hope you enjoy our conversation, get inspired, and become a statement maker. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Statement Makers podcast. I'm your host, Karen Vergara, and I'm so glad you have joined us. Today, our guest is Eddy Moratin. He is president of Lift Orlando, a nonprofit strengthening the historic neighborhoods around the downtown area of Orlando, Florida. Eddy has been a social entrepreneur in the for-profit and nonprofit sectors for 15 years. His life work is to inspire and equip leaders to make a difference, very much in line with being a statement maker. He enjoys working with community-minded leaders to rethink business and make an impact on social issues. Eddy, welcome to our show. So glad you're here.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for having me. What an honor.
Eddy, I introduced you as a social entrepreneur just a few moments ago, and everyone knows what an entrepreneur is, but a social entrepreneur, that may be a new concept for some of us. So please tell us, what is social entrepreneurship?
Well, for many years, I didn't know I was a social entrepreneur. The term has been coined in the last decade or so to try to describe people who measure taking risk and launching ventures by some other metric than just money. So there are social entrepreneurs that are starting what you might think is a very normal looking company. It could be a large enterprise like a Whole Foods, could be a very small startup like an online retailer of coconut oil, but they quantify the value of their company and the success of their efforts by not just how much money they make, but the impact it has on the world. Now, some social entrepreneurship ventures are all the way in the nonprofit category, where it's actually what you would think of as a social cause-related venture, but it may have some aspect of it that looks or behaves a lot like a business. And there are things that are in between. And so social entrepreneurship is now finding itself in a very kind of large and growing category, particularly with the emergence of impact investing. So impact investments look for these type of ventures that you might be described as social entrepreneurship sometimes. The challenge for the social entrepreneurship space is because it covers so much, oftentimes it's hard for people to really define. Is that really a nonprofit? Is it really a for-profit? Is it supposed to make money, or does it not matter if it makes money? I'm of the belief that those categories are simply tax classifications, whether you're a for-profit or nonprofit, and all the guidelines that come with that. But taking risk, imagining a different future, wanting to make an impact on the lives of other people, whether that's creating jobs or changing the environment, involves entrepreneurial skills, vision casting, strategizing, team building. And then doing that and thinking about a broader bottom line is what it means for me. I always prefer when it does operate like a business whenever possible.
So in line with this concept of social entrepreneurship, you lead Lift Orlando, which is an organization that has brought business and community leaders together to close the gaps for children and families. Could you share how the organization has done this and the type of impact it's had in the community that it serves?
Sure. A lot of it was born out of perspectives that I'd had in my journey, and then allowing myself to sort of see themes being recognized by leaders in our community here, mostly leaders in the business community who were starting in 2012 to acknowledge the need for a broader role from the local business community. But I've been involved in ministry, doing work in the inner city. I've been involved in civic organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, and in those spheres have seen the important role that business leaders can play for good or bad in communities when they take on causes that make the community better and stronger, or when they focus solely on profit and neglect the well-being of the communities that they're in, or only see those communities as places where they can benefit and walk away. And so a group of us downtown that really rallied together by a dear friend and current chair of our board, someone I really credit as the founder of Lift Orlando, because he was the one who first got a bunch of us in the room saying, it feels like business leaders are being relegated to just writing checks for people who are in the trenches doing social work. And so we go to each other's rubber chicken dinners, we sponsor events, we hear wonderful stories, we cry, and we write another check. And yet it feels like every year we're talking about the same problems and they don't seem to be getting better.
Right.
And so the question that really galvanized the conversation was, well, what if business leaders actually have something more to offer than just their checkbook? What if the way that you think about business, strategize, set goals, organize teams, the way you are very focused on results, the way you network and do research and compare and compete, what if all of those skills, which are not as prevalent in the government sector and not as common in the nonprofit sector, could actually be what's missing in attacking a lot of the most complex social causes in the city? And so we started Lift Orlando with the hope of igniting a movement of business leaders really investing their lives and talents in the community, and realized very early on the importance of centering such a thing on partnerships. And so today we really describe what we do as investing in people, the people who live in the communities, and then the folks that call that community home, but also they live there, they learn there, they work, they grow. And what are the institutions where they do that? Whether that's housing or schools, healthcare, employment opportunities, and then investing in all the partnerships that help the whole community prosper. And so that's a long backstory, but it describes for you kind of what the spirit of Lyft was at its beginning.
So what you're doing at Lyft is certainly different from other types of projects of its kind. And I wonder, was there a specific moment for you, Eddy, in your life or in your career where you realized you wanted to make a difference in your community, and that you could do that by facilitating these types of conversations between nonprofits and business leaders? Was there a specific moment when you thought, this is the path I want to take?
There were probably many specific moments, but one I recall the most, for me, a core driver has been my faith. But very early on, I thought of my faith as something distinctly different from my career. My career was something I might pray about, I might seek to have goals for, and hope that God would help me prosper in my aspirations. But the thought that these two things were related to each other much more intimately, that my career could actually be my calling, that the work in the secular space could have eternal importance, was not something until I was an adult I began to understand. And at first I just wrestled with it. And I was working at the Chamber of Commerce in my early 20s, and was falling in love with business and working with business leaders and entrepreneurs and helping them grow their businesses. I was a young director of membership services there back when our chamber was huge. And I remember struggling because I was also working very long hours in our church ministry. And I thought, I need to do one thing or the other. I don't know that I can keep doing both things. And there's a passage in the book of Matthew that says, let your light shine before all men, that they see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And that became for me a central organizing idea. Maybe it doesn't matter what I do, whether I wear the ministry hat or the corporate hat, the business hat or the nonprofit hat, the philanthropic or community services hat. If whatever I did somehow benefited people's lives so much, they didn't just thank me, but it pointed to a greater love. That became the beginning of a journey. I will also, there's a great program in town called Lifework Leadership that really focuses on helping people identify their calling and have a faith-based worldview for their work. That was the first time I met so many other business leaders who lived in that same tension. They were grounded in their faith and a sense of mission and purpose for the benefit of other people in their community, but they were lawyers and doctors and entrepreneurs and architects and had very secular jobs for the most part.
So it's this idea that you can have a career, yet that career can use the talents that you've been given and can impact someone else.
I years ago would always finish a lot of presentations with this statement that you were created to make a difference, no matter what you do for a living. That Work has meaning beyond making money, and business has a purpose beyond making profits. And that the character of our work reveals the image of our maker. And so we should aim to leave our mark, to be statement makers, to be excellent in everything that we do for the benefit of other people. It's also the most rewarding thing you could ever do. Like there are a lot of ways to be successful. You can make money, you can be healthy, you can accomplish a lot of things, but it's only when all of those things add up to helping others, especially others who may never be able to say thank you or pay the favor back, you realize that you're part of a larger tapestry for the greater good. And for me, it's been the best way to spend life is to spend it for others.
And you take your job of making an impact in your community through your work so seriously, Eddy, that you even moved with your awesome wife, Giselle, and your 2 children, and you moved to an area to serve, but that it's also not really considered the best in town. Why did you do that? Why did you make that decision?
Well, there were 2 primary drivers. I think what we learned getting to know the neighborhood, that what you don't catch in the nightly news are the amazing people who do live in the community, folks who have called the neighborhood home for generations, who have a sense of pride with these schools and these parts of town that have so much history. And so that was mind-blowing for me and humbling. And the sense of respect and admiration for so many of these families drew me to realize this is the kind of community and history I want my children to be acquainted with, to know and appreciate. Our first Black judge, Black city commissioner, county commissioner, police chief. I mean, you can go on and on. They've either graduated from Jones High School or from these neighborhoods. One of the first Black suburbs in the country in the 40s was here on the west side of town.
Right.
But in recent decades, we had seen such a degree of disinvestment, property owners and housing landlords that were absentee and really didn't care to invest in the community. The community wasn't getting what it deserved. And so we thought, gosh, how do we send a message to at least our small circle of influence that we not only admire and appreciate the people in this community, but this is the kind of community you want to be a part of if you're here. And so when we built our first development, Pendana at Westlakes, it's 200 units of mixed income housing that is intended to be the kind of place that integrates people from all walks of life. So we have residents that, are professionals, teachers, police officers. We've got people who own businesses, and we have folks that might be using a public subsidy to pay for their unit, but there's no difference between one unit and the other. And so we moved into the first market rate unit that had no subsidy to be part of that community. In a few months, we hope to be moving into a home we're able to buy in the neighborhood because of our desire to lay roots in a community that really has precious history. But we want the reputation of the communities of Westlakes, of the history and the heart of 32805 and all that Orlando owes to it, to be known to all. And so that it's been a great privilege to do that. It was by no means a sacrifice. I do have an amazing wife. It was actually her idea. Say like, hey, if we really care about this neighborhood the way we say we care about it, we should be a part of it. We shouldn't be on the outside looking in. So.
And we had this conversation before we even started the podcast, talking about the support that you get from your spouse. Yeah. And how important that is to also fulfill the calling that you have. What would you say about the fact that you can have a spouse or a spouse can really help you develop yourself and develop the talents and the gifts that you have so that you can give back?
Absolutely. If anyone listening to your podcast is single and they're contemplating such a decision as committing to another person for the rest of their life, it is the most important decision you will make as it relates to your personal success.
Right.
Your accomplishments, your achievement, your material wealth, and your lifelong well-being, even your life expectancy. It's directly related to the quality of your relationships, and none has a bigger impact than the person you spend the rest of your life with as your spouse. If you're in a relationship today and it might not be as perfect, I'll tell you, none is.
No, I'm married and I can attest to that. I love my husband very much, but it's not perfect every day.
No. But that's living a life on purpose, living a life of calling, living a life on mission really starts with understanding the priority of missions. There's Sandy Sugar, who recently announced his retirement as president of Valencia College. He's one of the wisest men I know. He is the closest I'll come to knowing a true Renaissance man. He's an academic. He's a scientist by training. He's a poet, a published poet. He's an author. He's a musician who still performs on a regular basis. He's a scratch golfer. He's an amazing speaker. It
Wow.
really feels like God gave him all the gifts and the rest of us got scraps.
Right.
But he said to me years ago that there are many leaders who pursue great goals, aim to change the world, but in the process, they base their decisions on the assumption that, one day all of us are going to die, and it's the things that we build, what we leave behind, that determines our legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that materialistic view of the world leads to expending people, using people, even neglecting the very people that we love in order to aim to some higher calling. Other people, other leaders, accomplish great things, change the world, but they look around, instead of saying that, man, we're all going to die and it's only what we build or do that stays behind, they say, actually everything I see will no longer be. And the only thing that lasts forever are the relationships I build along the way. And so they see the ventures and the dreams and the calling as a way to pour into people along the way. And so investing in a relationship like your companion for life, your spouse, the person that you love, your children, your siblings, even when those are hard, will bring the greatest reward long term. And things don't always pan out the way we think, but we often quit too soon on things that are well worthwhile.
Eddy, from what I know about you, you're a firm believer that we can also use you touched on this just a second ago, that we can use our money and our talents to be generous and create change in the places that we live. But there's a fine line that must be walked when it comes to wealth and power, right? I mean, it seems like in general, the more wealth or power someone has, the more removed they are from the type of social injustice or economic disparity that some individuals live with. What can we do about that? Do you think that's true?
I think the way we think about it is oftentimes what gets us in trouble, even for people who are well-intended. Money, power, and fame in abundance are unnatural human experiences. Think about most of human history and most of what human life is experienced as walking through life on earth. The event of having a very large amount of any of those three things is uncommon and something our brains are really not wired to process well. And so when you pursue them in excessive amounts, or when life just kind of lands on your lap, opportunities, hard work, strong efforts, success, or talent bring to you money, wealth, or power, or fame, you should think of it not so much as a blessing outright, because it could be one or the opposite. You should think it's almost like handling kryptonite. The more you hold them, the closer you hold on to them, the more vulnerable they make you to great risk and danger. The irony, however, is that if you live, especially in America, we aren't like called to work in kryptonite mines. These things are a part of all of our lives. We are 5% of the world's population, but by far most of its wealth. And so when you understand that it's not so that we shy away from power or wealth or money or any of these things, it's that we understand that they are a responsibility. And so we should steward them with trembling, with respect, with reverence. Like, I want to be a good steward of this. And if it grows, I feel bigger weight to be a good steward of it. I think the cure is to understand not just generosity as the practice of a habit to give to your favorite charity, or have United Way as part of your paycheck, or tied to a local church or faith community if that's part of your life, but to understand the value of simply sharing. That all those and the small gestures of looking for opportunities for random acts of kindness, for sacrificial gifts that are like more than you would normally do, but it would make a world of difference in someone's life, and it might even feel a little scary and uncomfortable. Welcome opportunities to do that. Now, the key is for a lot of folks, they're naturally spontaneous about that, but it can get them in trouble. And then they wonder like, oh my gosh, I'm up a creek without a paddle, but I help so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. You
Right.
can plan for that. You can budget for that. You can intentionally think, this is something we want to install in the way we think about money and the way that we plan for our lives, the same way we think about savings or think about our kids' education or think about retirement. What if you planned to be a generous person? It doesn't even have to be a lot of money. You don't have to be some big billionaire philanthropist. You can be somebody who has an extra $50, $100, $1,000, whatever works for you, that every week, every year, every month, you're thinking like, ooh, who can I help with this? And the act of parting with it creates something that gives you better immunity against the dangers of your mind and heart becoming warped by money or power or fame, because it reminds you that it's not all yours. That if you have it, it's for you to share. If you can use it, it's for you to benefit other people too.
Eddy, do you also, in line with that thought, do you have suggestions on how we can align our desire to be more generous, to also be more inclusive and offer opportunities for social mobility, especially in times like the ones we're living right now? It's certainly a historic time that has brought a lot of challenges to the surface, perhaps challenges that were dormant, but are now just front and center. And so many of us want to take part of the solution. So many of us want to give, like you're sharing, but we just don't know where to begin.
Oh, it's such a great point. I think a lot of times we simplify the things that require more respect for their complexity, and we overcomplicate things that are much more simple. Um, for our individual application in daily life, we just need to be good neighbors. The people that live near you, the people you come across, the folks that intersect with you in life. Are you aware enough? Are you in tune enough with the moment to stop, ask somebody how they're doing, and really mean it? And
Mm,
then take a minute or two to listen. Next time you ask somebody their name, actually listen to what their name was. Remember it and say it often. Like, that's so
yes.
simple.
Yeah.
Somebody moves into your neighborhood, don't go asking the neighbor who they are. Go show up with some brownies or something. Like, just those little simple things that we've seen on TV or Mayberry or when we're part of our lives as children, or that could invite creativity in our hearts. Just being good neighbors is something really, really simple, but you'd be surprised how much it opens up. It also is the root cause of these complex social issues that we're trying to unravel today. Put aside the politics, put aside the rhetoric, put aside the emotions. We are where we are today because a really, really long time ago, and over and over and over again throughout our history, we've seen opportunities to create opportunity and mobility and wealth for many. And on multiple occasions and at many layers of our government and our society, we've chosen to exclude others. We've chosen to do it for some, but not for others equally. And each time we've done that, we've not only hurt others, we've hurt every aspect of ourselves. There's no one who isn't touched by the damage done through that kind of prejudice and injustice. And so then you end up with entire systems and structures in our society that have been intentionally broken. Now, you may have millions of people working in sectors and industry, whether it's the prison complex, whether it's healthcare, whether it's housing, who are just showing up every day doing their job. They're just collecting a paycheck. They're not, breathing hateful bigotry and racism towards people of color, but they are, in their ignorance, often contributing to the very machine causing and perpetuating inequality. So we see that it's very well documented in the history of housing. We created a miracle in our country right after the war when we invented the 30-year insured mortgage. It created home ownership and a pathway to wealth for millions of Americans for the very first time. And we created that and said, well, you don't get that if you're Black or Jewish.
Wow.
And for anyone who was proud of their European heritage, they were Polish, they were German, they were Italian, they were French, well, you had to agree to call yourself white and move into the suburbs. And before the suburbs in the 30s and 40s, people living in the city, if an Italian married an Irish, it was like World War III, it's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
But we laid down arms in many ways to benefit from the way society structured the development of communities in those spaces. And we turned a blind eye on how it was unjust. And so the same thing has happened in other sectors. And today, obviously, we talked a lot about law enforcement and policing and criminal justice. Those are some of the most complex examples. There's a fantastic book that I've enjoyed reading recently called Upstream. And it basically talks about the need to, when we look at problems in society, don't just look at the problem. Don't just look at the cop and the man on the ground and how awful the situation is. You have to rewind the tape. How did they get there? Why does this situation repeat itself? Why are these people in the upper? It has more to do with layers and layers and layers and years of decisions and legislation and funding that has almost nothing to do with those particular individuals. And that's a different level of thinking. And I think for people who want to be part of the solutions, they have to invest the time to get smarter about our history. And don't let the emotions or the political rhetoric control the decisions that we make. We all have to make responsible decisions as citizens. It's the only way democracies work.
And it's a good point what you mentioned, that as individuals, we can at least start in our neighborhood. Do we know who our neighbor is? Do we know what their name is? Do you know where they work? Do you know the opportunities that they have or don't have? And it just takes a knock on their door and then some cookies or brownies and saying, hi, I'd like to get to know you better, or at least I'm here if you need me. It really starts, and that's what you empower people to do, is to make a change in their community, and it starts in your home and it starts in your neighborhood.
It's I like to describe it in many ways. Early in our history as a nation, we as we were building, we created the tools, this capitalistic economic system and democratic society for building communities, but it was still somewhat selfish, right? Even for our earliest leaders, the idea really only acknowledged white men. It wasn't even considering women or any other minority. And then as we grew in the latter part of the last century, we thought more broadly, but we really thought separately. We thought about, well, here's the American dream and all of its glory and beauty, and then you can go do something over here. We won't get in the way of that. I think the future for America, if we're to survive this moment, the invitation is to build shared communities, not selfish communities, not separate communities, but communities that are meant for all, where all of us want to prosper and want to see others prosper. One of my mentors in this space, Bob Lupton, started an organization called FCS in South Atlanta, where some of the demonstrations happened after that incident at Wendy's. And he said to me once that he learned early on that what communities experiencing disinvestment, injustice, and poverty that's extreme need most aren't programs and services. There's plenty of programs and services. There's often too many. Because what people need most are caring and connected neighbors. And then he told a funny story. He said after, years and years in the work, they realized, man, we need to do a better job at getting people jobs and helping them make more money and find opportunity and experience upward mobility in the American dream. So they started to do all this work to research and design a training program that would provide employment and economic opportunity and mobility. In the meantime, because he was living in the neighborhood, his boy would always play basketball in the neighborhood. And one day his son said he wanted to get a summer job. And so Bob is at church and he says to the lady who works in HR at the zoo, he says, hey, not asking for any favors, but my son was saying he wanted to get a summer job. Are you guys hiring at all? Could I send him down to see you? And she was like, sure, have him call me. I'd love to interview him, talk to him. So within a week's time, kid has a job at the zoo. He's back at the court playing with the guys, and he's like, oh, I can't come tomorrow because I got a job. They're like, you got a job? Where'd you get a job? It's like, at the zoo. Man, I need a job. Within 2 weeks, there's like a handful of other guys that are working at the zoo. Bob was still working on designing that employment program. Meanwhile, his son, because he was connected. Exactly. And so if you or I, or anyone listening, if you're a professional and you lose your job today, tomorrow you'll tell your friends and family, at most in the next few months, especially in this environment. It might take you a while to land a job, but statistically, 80% of the time you will land a job because of someone that you knew in your network already, opening a door of opportunity to someone you didn't know. But if you live in a neighborhood that's been underinvested, that where concentrated poverty has become a reality for some, then you find that if you lose your job and everyone you know is stuck in the same rut you are, the last thing that crosses your mind is to ask someone to lend you their good name in order to open up an opportunity. You might be more likely to ask a stranger for money because you think that's going to help you. And so what we need to invest in and recreate is we build high quality housing like we do because we want to keep families in the neighborhood as they prosper. We don't want them to leave. As one resident has put it so well, we want people to be able to live in a better neighborhood without having to leave their neighborhood. And creating neighborhoods where folks of all income levels, of education, of opportunity, call the same place home. And that's what opens up upward mobility for most of us.
Again, it's a conversation. Sometimes it's all it takes. And knowing that neighbors can use our help and we need to just be more connected and be open to connecting others as well, right? It's almost just having our arms open, having our ears and eyes open, and feeling like we can all come together and really rise together, not just as one. Eddy, I've enjoyed this conversation very much, and I know that our listeners will as well. What are ways that we can connect, others can connect with you? What are your social media handles? How can they reach out to you?
Thank you. You can follow Lift Orlando. We actually will be unveiling a new site very soon with more opportunities for people to engage in the mission and the work and stay tuned with anything happening with Westlake. So this is the name of the area that's been retitled by residents who live here at the heart of 32805, surrounding Camping World Stadium. So everything between Paramore and Washington Shores, they've rebranded as the Communities of Westlakes. We have a resident-led organization called Westlakes Partnership. You can also find them online, and the opportunities to promote businesses here, hire people from here. We're working on ways for folks to be engaged in such direct manner. So we're excited to be able to share a little bit with you. And it's been such a pleasure, Karen, to share this time with you. I love that we've talked about so many different things.
Well, Eddy, I know you're a busy man, and I'm just so glad that we got this time to share about your passion for social entrepreneurship and your desire to make your community a better place to live. So that's what this podcast is all about. Thank you so much for your time, Eddy.
Thank you. It's been my privilege.
Friends, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this conversation with Eddy. As you could tell, we got to talk about many things. I have 3 takeaways. Number 1, we can align our career to serve others and fulfill our inner purpose. Number 2, it is worth investing in our relationships, including marriage, children, even when it's not easy. And number 3, I am going to go knock on my neighbor's door and learn more about who they are and what they do. Who knows, maybe I'll even bake something delicious for them. And I invite you to do the same. Let's all go knock on our neighbor's door and start building better communities around us. If you do, please let me know. You can tag me on Instagram at Statement Makers Podcast. And as always, help us spread the love. Take a screenshot of your phone and share it with someone who would enjoy this podcast. I hope you join me on our next episode. And remember, you already have everything you need to become a statement maker.